You are listening to the Necropolis podcast, which is brought to you by Jason from Goatcraft and Shelly from HateMeditations.com and Metal Legion magazine. Welcome to this early edition of Necropolis. We are back in action with an interview today. We do have the wonderful Shelly as the co-host. Thank you, Shelly, for coming on.
Thank you very much. It's a very civilized 11 in the morning here. Very happy to be here.
Yep, it is 4:58 a.m. here in Texas, but this is a truly global Anglosphere episode today. We have myself here in the U.S., we have you in England, and we also have Despotter from the glorious Midnight Odyssey all the way from Australia. So thank you for joining today, Despotter.
Hello, and thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, so just randomly had reached out to Luciano, who's the owner of Voidhanger Records, and inquired if it would be cool if we, interviewed you. And he was like, well, I have good news, Jason. He has a new album coming out that we're just now going to announce. I'm like, wow, that's really good timing. So I did listen to your new album. It's Biolume Part 3. Is that just going to be like a trilogy, or are you going to continue doing that, Biolume?
No, that's going to be the end of that particular trilogy. I think I'm more than ready to start something else now. Some of these songs have been around for a good 7 or 8 years now, I think. So I'm looking forward to writing something new.
I see. So the concept behind the album is like worshiping, or not essentially worshiping, but just being engulfed by the full moon and all the unpleasantries that brings about. And I'm unsure how versed you are in like occultism or things of that nature, where there's significance about the moon, like there's drawing down the moon and a lot of occult references to the moon, and it's kind of like established, and the sun is more like order and more universal, whereas because it bestows life, et cetera, whereas the moon is more personal. The moon is it has a subjective aspect, is more what Shelley would say like Dionysian, where you're just enraptured by I know you explore themes in your album of like madness and elements like that, where it's like very highly subjective and like how we perceive things. Is that kind of what you're going? Because I believe the part 2 was about the sun, right?
Yeah, part 2 was definitely kind of focused on I guess being in the presence of the harsh sunlight, coming from Australia where it's quite hot. It's something I'm quite familiar with, more so than the frozen landscapes of Northern Europe. But yeah, Biolume 3 is centered around kind of more mythologies of the moon, Luna, Selene. It's kind of got influences from, I guess, Greco-Roman traditions. And as you said, the famous drawing down the moon it's even on the front cover. They are like the witches with the chains literally pulling the moon down. So there's all sorts of themes explored on this. Also the Endymion story, which is where basically Luna or Selene is in a way cursed to fall in love with this shepherd, and she wants him to stay with her forever, basically, because he's just immortal. And so she's either, well, there's different versions of it, but pretty much Zeus essentially keeps him forever youthful, but he just has to sleep forever. So there's kind of like that semi-tragic kind of story involved there. So yeah, it's there's a lot of elements that I've taken for this, which is kind of also where Biolume 1 and Biolume 2 have originated from as well. So yeah, it's also like I like to think of the trilogy as kind of exploring the different elements within light. Um, Biolume 1 being kind of in a situation where you you're literally in darkness, you have very little light. It's trying to almost find the light, or animals or organisms or fungi or something that creates their own light, like the bioluminescence. Number Biolume Part 2 is obviously being about being in the presence of the thing which gives us the light, which is the sun. And the third one is kind of this introspective, almost darker, little bit chaotic, a bit more maddened scenario where, essentially the moon is this entity that floats across the sky at nighttime. It's a dead being. There's no life on there, and to get its light requires it to reflect it from another source. So it's kind of this finding a way to kind of balance how much light and darkness you bring into your own existence.
I see. So it's all about how the photons are treated from, getting it directly from the sun or reflected back from the moon. And yesterday in Texas, and I believe in other parts of the US too, we had a solar eclipse where, the moon passes in front of the sun for us. So that's kind of interesting. It's like all of a sudden now we have an episode about the moon a little bit here. So it sounds like you're quite well versed in Greco-Roman mythologies, as well as more like the science and physics aspects of like space and all that, and you explore a lot of the aspects of the celestial and the beyondness, rather than how we're fixed here on planet Earth. Do you have like an education, like formal education, like college degree and like Greco-Roman stuff, or science or anything like that, or is just a hobby of yours?
Yeah, no formal education. I just read a lot, just do my own kind of personal research into things. Writing an album, it's always a good excuse to kind of find a theme, or I use a lot of Latin passages in songs, so it's always an opportunity to discover, or maybe rediscover some things that I've read in the past. But it's just more of a personal fascination, that I think the sky is probably one of the most important things to humanity, and probably has always been that way. We've always looked upwards and kind of tried to make sense of what's there, and tried to put meaning to the things that are there, and why they move in a certain way, or its essence is almost trying to find a structure to our existence. It's trying to put an order to our existence, and it's just something that's always personally fascinated me.
I see. Yeah, there's something about metalheads in general, like especially musicians who are really involved. They tend to be experts in a lot of different fields, because I guess being a metalhead requires a degree of obsessiveness, and it's a personality trait, I should say. And we tend to get really into the nitty gritty of things and have hobbies. I know Shelley has a what's essentially a master's degree or postgraduate degree here in philosophy, specializing in ethics. So Shelley, I see that you're on mic. Did you have a question to ask?
Yeah, I was going to sort of bring it round to the musical evolution of Midnight Odyssey, because like you're typically positioned as sort of ambient or atmospheric black metal, and I would definitely say sort of from the early stuff, like the Firmament demo and Funerals from the Astral Sphere, the album, it was a particular kind of very atmospheric, very ambient black metal, but as we've already discussed, sort of focused on the celestial sphere. But with the Biolume trilogy, you started moving into, I mean, I wouldn't even describe it as black metal anymore. There's a lot more clean vocals. There's a lot more kind of melodic expression and stuff that seems to be borrowed from like heavy metal and, you know, even sort of epic doom metal sort of riffs that, you know, they are placed in a different context within the Midnight Odyssey album, but they kind of take, yeah, some of that euphoria and almost anthemic kind of elements as well. Was that like a conscious move to sort of evolve away from black metal, or was it sort of an organic process?
A little bit of both, probably. I guess. I mean, I've been influenced by a lot of music outside of black metal, and I feel like there's always been traces of it that have kind of seeped through into the music. But Biolume was kind of more about just adding different elements to what I had normally done in the past. I mean, to be fair, Shards of Silver Fade is quite a mixed album too. I kind of look at that particular album as kind of like the merging of the three projects that I had previously going at once, and decided to kind of just end the other two just to focus on Midnight Odyssey. But it's kind of like the music all kind of melded in together at that stage. Biolume is kind of a somewhat extension of that. Part one, you know, there's little bits of electronic bits in there, but it's slightly, it's probably the most traditional Midnight Odyssey, I would say, out of the three. Biolume 2 is definitely influenced by epic doom metal. There's, you know, I think of bands obviously like Candlemass, but also maybe like Solitude Eternus, the Russian doom bands, Skald. I don't know how to actually pronounce that one. But just this kind of mixture of almost like Bathory heavy Viking metal mixed with Candlemass doom metal. And it's something I wanted to do a lot of, even and with the clean vocals a lot. But I didn't want to completely leave the black metal parts or the ambient parts or the neoclassical parts away from it. So there was a bit of a conscious decision. But the third one is, I'd say it's less doomy. It's probably, there are tracks on it that are quite blast beat oriented for good portions of the song.
Out of curiosity, do you listen to any sort of religious music, specifically sort of Gregorian chants? Because Shards of Silver Fade is a personal favorite of mine, and the first track on there, for anyone that hasn't heard it, it has a very, very long, I wouldn't even call it an introduction, just sort of a slow ambient build with these reverby vocals, but it does kind of call to mind almost church music in a way, in the way it kind of, the chants kind of build on each other.
Yep, absolutely. The styles of plain chant, and I've listened to various forms of, I guess you would say, sacred choral music, for want of a term, going basically from your Gregorian chant through to when they started experimenting more with polyphony, through like the Ars Nova and the Paris, the Parisian school and things like that, kind of towards the late Middle Ages, and then obviously going into more Renaissance, like Palestrina and this really elaborate thing. It's something that I've never quite been able to pinpoint. Like, I absolutely like don't care about the message or what they're singing about, but just the way that they sing it and the music itself completely resonates with me. And it's probably just because it is just the human voice, and just what the human voice is actually capable of doing, particularly when you stick it in a nice big reverb heavy cathedral or hall or something like that. It's just, yeah, it's almost otherworldly. Like you can see why the church hooked people in for so long.
Well, yeah, I was going to say you don't have to be religious to be affected by that, because um it's like the level of dedication that they had for their religion sort of inspired all kinds of artwork, not just in music, but architecture and so on. And yeah, it's very easy to be affected by it and take inspiration from it, because yeah, you're right. It's like, even setting aside the religious aspect, it's human, and it's very kind of universal expression. And yeah, obviously it finds its way into a lot of metal music, but I thought specifically with some passages of Midnight Odyssey, it really does kind of come through as an influence. So running in, just to carry on with the musical aspect as well, sort of running in parallel to the Biolume series, you've also had like a series of ambient albums under the Midnight Odyssey name as well. Was that just to kind of expand on that like aspects of your sound? Because that's almost like, I don't use the word retro because it sounds a bit derogatory, but it's very kind of 70s inspired, both in terms of like the artwork and some of the references to sort of 70s early ambient stuff as well.
Yeah, it is. For me, I've always wanted to do. Well, I always wanted to do one album where there literally wasn't any vocals, wasn't any guitars, no drums or drum programming, like just pure synth. And that, yeah, the 70s, the Berlin School, Tangerine Dream, Klaus Schulze, all those individuals and bands have probably been as an influence on my music just as much as black metal or other forms of metal. So I felt like it was something that I really wanted to do. It kind of coincided with COVID lockdowns as well, so gave me a bit of an opportunity to actually do something as well. And the artwork is also inspired kind of more by 70s your sci-fi pulp fiction novels that had these fantastic artworks on the front cover. So many usually uncredited, but like just these amazing kind of, not just otherworldly, but just even the style of artwork. It was all bright colors. It was all very, I'd say trippy in a way, but like it had its own style, and that's kind of what I was trying to get with those albums.
Yeah, there must be a name for that aesthetic, because I've from my father-in-law, I've got inherited a huge batch of like the sci-fi anthologies. And yeah, they've all got this just amazing artwork on the cover that's really kind of evocative. But yeah, it's like retro futurism, I think. But yeah, they're all kind of surreal, but not sort of Salvador Dali surreal. They kind of have a realism to them as well. But yeah, very kind of striking colors and stuff. And also, I kind of just need to uh, sort of get into the fact that every single Midnight Odyssey album is quite long. They're all kind of
Yep.
huge, monolithic pieces of music. Do you how do you approach like writing a new album? Because it's all you. It's a solo project. So is it sort of, you map out the concept first, or you'd write more traditionally, work from a riff or two and piece it together from there, or is it keyboard driven initially and the guitars come in later? How is it constructed from the ground up?
Um, I have a lot of different ways of actually starting to write music, but um, in all honesty, I always feel like I'm behind, like I'm always catching up, in the sense that I've been writing music since, well, Black in 98, 1999, when I was in high school, and nothing really ever came of those. But I have all these riffs that have just been sitting there, and every time I write something new, I go, oh, actually, this song kind of works with this as well. So I develop a little bit more, and it's almost like I always have songs to choose from before I even start the next album. There's always something left over. There's always stuff that I haven't used. So generally speaking, it just kind of depends. The starting point is where I need to actually what I want the next album to be about. If I want it to be themed about something, if I want it to sound a particular style, I'll look at what I've written already and I'll kind of take things from those songs. Maybe I'll take the whole song and then I'll just try and build it up around that. Sometimes it's written by keyboards first. Sometimes it's written by guitar first. Sometimes it's actually a couple of songs have even been written by bass first. So it's, yeah, I don't try to necessarily do it in one way or one thing. Like it's just something that's, I feel is always with me and I've always got stuff there for the next album.
I see. With that, I noticed that this album was substantially more darker than prior Midnight Odyssey albums. Granted, each album's kind of different, but and I've heard, you know, darker material from some of your other releases, but this one seems like deliberately dark. Especially like once you start getting into the album, you know, about 20 minutes into it, which is only like the second and third song, then it's, you know, rather kind of like mid Emporish type of vibe. I'm not saying it's, you know, like that exactly, but I feel that a lot of black metal bands try to mimic that era of Emperor and they fail aesthetically, at least. But you're able to conjure up this great sounding symphonic black metal sound, especially with the third track, The Long Forgotten Dead. I feel that that's one of the darker songs that I've heard from you. So, you know, that goes along with the themes of, you know, hardly any photons, hardly any light. Therefore, it is dark. So, was that deliberate? Have
Yeah,
it.
yeah. The third part of the album was always meant to kind of be the darkest of the three. It, you know, if it follows a story, it's not about a happy ending. Like it's about, you know, kind of discovering chaos and it's I've yeah it's kind of strange going from obviously Biolume 2, which is a bit more of a triumphant, I won't say positive, but you know, like it has a more uplifting kind of beat to it and feel to it. But this one is definitely darker. It's kind of coming from places that, you know, I've either suppressed or haven't really felt for quite some time. So you know, it's something that is always there, but have always been a bit conscious of it getting too far, I guess. It's probably the best way to describe it. But it's hard because obviously I can't really describe it without a lot of people having heard it yet. But it definitely has a I'll say like probably more of the atmosphere of the early mid-90s at its spirit, at its core.
Yeah, I wouldn't say, you know, it's like, hey, this is like Emperor or mid-period Emperor or anything like that. I mean, what I mean is like the textural production is, you know, pristine, and a lot of black metal bands really try to go, you know, for the symphonic style of black metal, they really try to go for like the Emperor sound. And I feel that you're able to accomplish, you know, a similar aesthetic, you know, just in speaking about the textures as, you know, that period of Emperor, which is kind of top shelf for what it is. And there's so many bands out there, keyboardists, that, you know, they just don't match up to it. And I feel that your production, you're able to, you know, have the packaging essentially where, you know, the aesthetic is there, but you weave it differently because there's more influences there than just Emperor. There's summoning, and I picked up on the Viking era Bathory stuff as well, because one aspect of Midnight Odyssey and what that shares with the Viking era Bathory is this long buildup of drama, war and all that. And so I definitely can pick that up too, because you have these long stretches of drama that's being developed, and then you have, the traditional riffs and all that coming in. And so it's really relying a lot on the atmosphere, the drama and all that for the listener to, get soaked up in. And then, here comes like the meat and potatoes of the song. So that falls under how long-winded the songs tend to be. But you do also have a shorter song on the album, Death and Crimson Fire. It's not even 3 minutes. So congratulations for writing a short song.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, that was definitely something that I wanted to put on there. But the basis of that particular song is actually more of a neoclassical piece that I wrote, I think about 2001. And still have a really old rough recording of it somewhere, which I dug up, and I was like, oh, actually I could probably use that for a song. So it just fit the aesthetic of the album quite well. But yeah, like kind of going back to Shelley's mention about the length of the songs and the albums themselves, it's it's not for everyone. But I don't write the music for everyone. I write it for myself, and some of my most favorite songs from a lot of black metal albums tended to be the longer songs. I think of like, Emperor and the Nightside Eclipse. The first song is like 8 minutes or something. In the Woods, Heart of the Ages first song, Yearning the Seas of Black. What is it called? Yearning the Seas of a New Dimension or something. It's like a 10+ minute song. Limbonic Art, 10+ minute songs. It was just something where I kind of like I could appreciate the fact that it was like there was a build up. There was almost like a, the actual song, but there was just always this, like, it was more than just a song. It was almost an act in a way, like a not necessarily a chapter, but like an act of a play or or something like that. It had to have the complete, beginning, middle, end kind of fragment to it. And I guess I've just kind of kept going along with that kind of mentality throughout.
Yeah.
But
Sorry to interrupt, but yeah, I think that's where the summoning comparison comes in as well, because they obviously write very long songs as well. But I think they obviously have a very distinctive atmosphere and distinctive style, but it does sort of pivot on gradual repetitions and evolutions that do feel more like a soundtrack to a story in a lot of ways. And I think, yeah, Midnight Odyssey does follow on from that, in that a lot of bands these days are writing longer material, and it's partly like a function of things being released online, not necessarily doing a physical release, and people have sort of unlimited space to express themselves. But I think the Midnight Odyssey sound does really lend itself to that, because there's lots of space to draw the listener in terms of like the atmosphere, creating the vibe, creating the tension, and then working up to, as Jason said, the meat and potatoes in terms of like the riffs, the vocal melodies, and so on. So, but there's a lot of space around that to kind of like set the scene almost. And yeah, it isn't for everybody, but I would be surprised if fans of like atmospheric ambient black metal had a problem with long songs, because it does almost define the genre in a lot of ways.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. So you recently did a European tour a few weeks ago. I had read, just prepping for this interview today, I'd read interview you did like 8 years ago or something like that, where you said it's like, nope, no plans to ever play live, but here you are, now in the future, and you have, assembled an ensemble of musicians and did a European tour. So with that, now's the time to start playing live. Do you feel like the project's been out there long enough in the public consciousness where you can go out and play shows and it can be a rewarding experience?
It's something that has been creeping into my mind more and more over the past 5 or so years. I think also, again, I'll throw in COVID probably had a bit of a impact on that. Where I was thinking, just fuck it, just do it. Like, it could be shit. People might hate it, but at least you've gone out there and just gave it a go. And part of the problem of why I didn't really want to play live was I really found it difficult to kind of see how it would work. It's just there was so much to the music in pieces. It was very hard for me to kind of just compartmentalize that into, okay, that's one guitarist, that's a second guitarist, that's a bass player, that's whatever, yeah, et cetera. And I think, yeah, the more I thought about it, the more I looked into it, and eventually it was like, yeah, I'm just going to do it. And it was kind of a bit of coincidence, because I think a week after I had talked to my friend Clint, who did guitars on the tour, and I said, look, I'm going to do this. Do you want to join? And then a week later, I got an email from Cosmic Void saying, I know you don't play live, but we're just putting it out there. Do you want to come? And it just seemed a bit fortuitous. I like to think I'm not superstitious, but I think I am a bit superstitious. So I just went, yeah, I think that's a sign that I have to do it. So yeah, and it was a very interesting experience. Cosmic Void was quite the hell of a show to play for your first live show. I think the Electric Ballroom has like 1,500 capacity or something. So I think I had always pictured in my mind, if I was going to take it live, that I wanted the first show to be something special. I didn't want it to just be in a corner of a bar, like just with like 10 people or something. But yeah. So, I guess, grown older, mind changed, things have changed. So
Well, it sounds like a really great experience to start with a big, festival like that. And it sounds, kind of interesting how just the puzzle pieces fell into place in that regard. Just like I said earlier, where, just out of the blue, I asked Shella, is like, hey, are there any bands off of Voidhanger that you would like to interview? And we both agreed upon Midnight Odyssey. So I reached out to Luciano, and boom, he's like, oh, they're coming off an album too. It's like everything's lining up properly. And it sounds like that is also what happened with this, getting a band together, essentially a live band, and playing a festival, doing a European tour. I recently, last year, I went to England, just kind of gallivanting around, and I went to a festival there. I forget, Incineration or something like that festival, where Emperor was playing, and I was talking to one of the guys that just happened to be at the concert, and he saw that I was American, and it's like, why American black metal sucks is that because you guys have no ancient roots and no great myths or anything like that, and I can kind of like understand that from his point of view. But also, like, he would probably say the same thing about Australian black metal and Australian metal, of not having, as deep of roots throughout history. What's your kind of feel about like Australian metal, black metal, all of that? Do you kind of share that sentiment that like European black metal succeeds more because of the cultural history?
I think European black metal has probably more of a distinct sound. I think a lot of the sounds are very inspired by, I'll say, traditional music rather than like ancient music, because a lot of this traditional music is still only probably 100 or 200 years old. But I feel like they have a much more deeper connection to where they're from. They have a much deeper connection to the land that they live on, and their families. If they've lived in the same town or village for generations, it's much easier to find a connection. Much more easy to find a spiritual belonging, I guess you could say there. Australia is a little bit like the United States and Canada, I guess, in that regards, and that the majority of the people that live there aren't originally from that land. They're not originally from that continent. And kind of in that process, a lot of individuals' history and their family past has for a lot of people, it's been lost. They don't have much connection to where they've come from. I think in Australia, we're as in terms of Europeans, we haven't been in Australia as long as Europeans have been in America. So I think a lot of Australians have a little bit a better chance of a connection there to their European ancestry. But the metal scene in general, I think, has absolutely nothing to do with in Australia has nothing to do with our ancestry, or there are some bands that obviously sing about paganism and they sing about ties to forefathers and stuff like that. But I feel that Australia has this element of being just completely secluded from the rest of the world, and it's such a big country and it's so sparsely populated. It takes so much effort to tour in Australia. There are no bus tours, there are no coaches. You have to fly everywhere. It takes, you go from, say, Brisbane, you drive to Sydney, I think that's like 11 hours drive, and then you'd have to drive to Melbourne, which I think is another like 12 hours or something like that. So it's impractical to kind of do that. And as that isolation is something that I think a lot of people are familiar with, because they like, obviously, as metalheads, the European, the American scenes are the biggest scenes in the world, and that's where most of the bands come from. So there is a part of feeling like you want to be a part of it, but you're so separated and you're so isolated from it that you don't think you can ever really make it anywhere, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Shelly, I see that you took your muted button off. Did you have something to say?
You've already predicted what I was going to say in the chat, in that it's interesting that guy at Incineration Festival would talk about the reason why Americans aren't very good at black metal, not being connected to roots and stuff, because like UK black metal isn't really anything to shout about. I think when we're talking about European metal, it is like mainland Europe that we're talking about, in that the UK tends to be a bit of an outlier in terms of the fact that it never really had any distinctive like black metal sound or contribution beyond a couple of kind of notable exceptions. But I think as far as black metal is concerned, the US definitely has us beat, and Australia as well to some extent. But it's kind of, when you are from a place that isn't necessarily connected to its past in the way that they are in Scandinavia, for instance, it is a tendency to kind of lift your lore or your conceptual kind of material for your music from just other places, whether that's mythology or whether it's other historical periods, or as in the case of Midnight Odyssey, like more looking upwards to the sky. It almost, I don't know if it's almost like liberating in a way to say, well, I'm not tied to any particular identity, so I might as well just start fashioning something new almost.
Yeah, the Americans
Mm-hmm.
tended to just focus on like death metal essentially, and stripping that down and calling it, black metal, just make it really blasphemous, and strip down death metal to its basic components, which might be war metal-y to some people. But so that, like, there was like a great death metal tradition. I would say that's like the bedrock of the USBM scene. And then, then came all the shoegazing stuff later. But yeah, it's what that guy said. I don't really agree with it either, because obviously it's like he was probably thinking about like Hecate Enthroned and Cradle of Filth and bands like that as being good, which is debatable. Like, Danny Filth was upset when we referred to his music as being like regurgitated Iron Maiden. But good times, good times. So will you continue playing live? Are you ever going to come to the US or tour other places, or is this just like a one-time deal, just play Europe?
I have one festival booked in next year in Germany called Dark Troll Festival, which is in May. And I'm currently in talk with a couple of other people to kind of flesh that out. So I'm not coming all the way just for one show. So hopefully I can say that there will be a few more shows added to that European tour next year. Of course, I'd absolutely jump at the opportunity to come to the States or Canada or, even South America if everyone, wanted Midnight Odyssey there. It really is just there's so many factors of making a band from Australia, being able to travel that far, because it is extremely expensive. The flights from Australia to anywhere at the moment are just exorbitant, and for small promoters or even smaller festivals, it's too much for them to pay for a band to fly over. So it's not something that's happening right now, but I'm not going to say it won't happen. And I don't know, if anyone listens and is a promoter and wants to bring me over, just hit me up.
Yeah, Australian's kind of a strange beast because it's so far geographically disconnected from the rest of the quote unquote metal world, where the metal world's kind of just being global now. But there are hot spots. Like you said, South America is a really big hot spot for black metal. Like we could have like local black metal bands here that draw 10, 20 people. They go down to South America and get like 1,000 people. So it's definitely one of the hot spots out there. So I did have a question. During your tour, you did stop by Italy and see Francesco, or not Francesco, you saw Luciano from Voidhanger Records, and I know he's put out all of your albums, I believe. And he's been a great champion for your music. What was that experience like, finally meeting Luciano?
That looked to once Cosmic Void had kind of been confirmed, it was the first thing after that I basically organized. I said, Luciano, we've known each other for 14, 15 years. I've never even seen you before. He had a pretty rough experience a couple of years. He was in ICU with COVID complications a couple of years back. Quite serious. He'd probably be embarrassed for me to say this, but he was kind of saying his goodbyes to me via email, which was kind of really hard to take for me. It was really, I guess it was kind of a moment that you don't really expect to happen at any stage, but it was also like, hang on, Luciano's done so much for my music as well as so many other bands. His label is a label of passion, and it's what he likes. It's never driven by money. It's never driven by sales. It's never driven by prestige or being a known name in the scene. If he listens to it and he likes it, and it's if it's an unsigned band, he'll ask them about it, and I think I've had record labels approach me, and some some have been quite forthright in the money aspect almost immediately, and it's just been like, oh, like, no, if that's kind of all you care about, like, I don't feel comfortable immediately with that. But Luciano, he really likes the music that he releases. Like he's really personally invested in it. So to go over there and actually, meet him and spend a day and a couple of nights there was just amazing. Palermo is where he lives in Sicily, and such an amazing place. Having spent a week in London, it was great to go to the Mediterranean and just very, very different environment. I have been to Italy before, but I haven't been to Sicily, so that it was something special, and I'm so glad that I was given the opportunity to do that after all these years, and kind of say face to face thank you, which was probably the most important thing for me. So
Yeah, it's weird that labels of in underground metal would be. I mean, I know you have to make money to kind of keep your business going, but you're never really going to make a living in this, making this kind of music, especially for a certain size label. But the thing I've always admired about Voidhanger is it's been like really long standing. Like a lot of labels of a similar size have had to crumble at some point, either because whoever's keeping it going just can't dedicate the free time, or there's some sort of inner politics or bickering or something that kind of puts it to bed. But yeah, it's impressive that it's gone on for so long, but maintained that integrity of the artists on there that are all very distinctive. Is never sort of putting out something for the sake of it. Even if I don't like something on there, it's always worth listening to, because you're going to get something a bit different and interesting.
yeah, it's a very eclectic mix that he has, and I mean, he listens to a lot of music as well, so um he if he likes it and he can release it, like it's like he looks after it. I think too, he's quite smart. Like, he's run the label. He didn't try to print thousands of vinyls and limited edition things from the get-go. Like, he built it up slowly, just gradually increased the roster, got a little bit of a name for himself, and like everything has been a natural progression. And I think as a musician, it's been pretty good to see kind of both his and my journey kind of happen at the same time in that way. So yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely has a big open mind. So years ago, when I was becoming like super, super obsessed with classical music, I was like, "Hey, Luciano, check out this Mahler. Hey, check out this Bruckner." And he went out and bought like 50 CDs the next day. He's like, I'm loving this, Jason. And he sent me all of what he got. And definitely, when he gets into something, he gets into it fully. And so I can definitely see why you'd want to stay with him, being that he's been such a great voice for your music, a good conduit, essentially. So yeah, Shelley, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just had one sort of final question. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to make the Cosmic Void Festival. So I'm based in Leeds. It's about 3 hours away from London, but unfortunately I wasn't able to make the festival. But a good friend of mine went and really enjoyed the show. But I also promised him that I would, when I mentioned that I was joining a podcast with you, that I would just ask about your other projects, because you mentioned earlier that you've kind of folded them into Midnight Odyssey. So you had like a doom metal project, Tempestuous Fall, and another sort of atmospheric concept black metal project called The Crevices Below. And yeah, he just mentioned that he really does love the Crevices Below album, and just wanted to ask if there was ever any plans to sort of recreate that project, or like put out another album under that name, or is it sort of, are those both put to bed now?
Um, it's something I can't really give a definite answer either way. I think the crevices below of the two is probably the one that's more dead, if I can put it that way. It's it, a lot of the things have just kind of folded into Midnight Odyssey. Like it's not it is stylistically a bit different, but it's not enough for me to kind of think, hey, I'm going to write a new The Crevices Below album. Tempestuous Fall is probably the one that will be the most chance of being resurrected. I also have a like a dark electro goth synth pop band called Death Comes Crawling, which is another project which I kind of have worked on a little bit. Hopefully there'll be like a CD edition of the second album that came out last year, I think it was, on my Voidhanger soon. So, I've got there's I don't want to give a definite yes or no. I think
Yeah,
keep it
no, I
keep it
could definitely see.
ambiguous. Yeah.
Obviously, you don't want to kind of sort of definitely commit to something because who knows what will happen in the future. But I would tend to agree. Like the Crevices Below album, if it's like it is distinct to Midnight Odyssey, but it feels like a particular concept album in the Midnight Odyssey style. Around, rather than exploring like the celestial sphere, it's sort of going underground and kind of trying to capture that atmosphere. Whereas, I can see what you mean in terms of Tempestuous Fall. There's a bit more room for maneuver or making it a distinct thing to Midnight Odyssey because it's slightly different genre.
Yeah, I probably should just quickly mention the Crevices Below album. I wrote in 2011. We had some pretty massive flooding here in Brisbane back then, and it basically was, we'll cut off for probably like 6 weeks. So I had literally nowhere to go. So that's kind of when I wrote that album. And there were the two extra tracks from the Crevices Below and also Tempestuous Fall on the Converge Rivers of Hell three-way split that I did with myself. And so it's something. If a situation was to come up where I felt, hey, I'm going to write this, then maybe I will. But yeah.
Yeah, I was just about to bring it up that the Converge Rivers of Hell, which is actually the first time I ever heard Tempestuous Fall. That is a three-way split with yourself, and not many people can say they've done a three-way with themselves. So congratulations on that.
I knew you were gonna go there.
Sorry, I have to say at least one Bronxy thing, but that's actually how I discovered Tempestuous Fall. Really, that song in Death's Gaping Jaws. I really love that song. I feel like the drama is really built up, and the clean vocals is just really meshes well, and a very narrative song. And that's something I've always thought about your music, is that aspect of narrative. You're telling this grand story, and pulling in like Late Bathurst, as we were talking about earlier. So it seems like it's you may have a lot of material that you wrote when you were younger, but the way you're presenting it now is more in like a narrative format where you want to take people on a journey, or a Midnight Odyssey, essentially. So that's really cool. Just a quick question. Being you play all the instruments yourself, like what type of keyboards do you use? Do you use like MIDI or like actual like workstations, or like what's the setup like?
I have used real keys occasionally, but most of it I actually just use plugins. I kind of, but what's probably the best way to describe it? I'm never kind of happy. I'm always like changing things, mixing things, and just to have it all on MIDI. For me, through the computer and a MIDI controller and various plugins is kind of a good way for me to just change things until I'm well satisfied, I guess. So it's there's always a little bit of experimentation as I'm recording as well. So you know, new ideas come. It's the advantage of being a one man band is I don't have to worry about time constraints of other people. I don't have to have other input. Um, you know, it's my own mind and it's just me just kind of exploring and discovering and you know, you know, it's probably the most natural way for me to actually write songs is like that, as opposed to just using you know, an actual synthesizer or a workstation. But I have used a couple on a couple of tracks here and there.
I see. So you also write the guitar parts and you physically play the drums, right? On your releases.
Physically it's MIDI, it's computer like drum programming.
Oh, I see. It sounds really authentic, the way you program it. So congratulations on that. Getting like a realistic drum sound is not the easiest feat to do. But yeah, it's still, you know, writing all the music and all the, you know, lyrics and doing all the vocals is still a great undertaking. And what are your general thoughts? You feel like you can express more by yourself, creating all this music and then having like a live band present it live? Have you ever been in, you know, projects where it was like a regular band format, and what was the experience like with that? If you can talk about that.
Yeah, definitely. I've played instruments in other bands. In you know, I'm familiar with rehearsal studios and live stages. It's a very different process. It's I mean, to be fair, those songs aren't 10-15 minute long songs. But you know, there's definitely there is merit to collaboration. I think, you know, you can improve a song, but you know, it's on the ones that I've been allowed to kind of help write a bit, like, you know, the Midnight Odyssey me comes out and, you know, I change the song completely and different time signatures and different tempos, and then it's like a 15-minute song and it's like, all right, let's just start again and not worry about that. But you know, it's yeah, it's different, but it's not something I want to do with Midnight Odyssey. It's, you know, I'm almost in a like a planned I can't even say the word. Like there's the method now. There's almost like a method that I've been able to work out. There's like a system that, you know, I can sit down and just start doing something and it just works. And it's taken a long time to get to that stage, but like I can, yeah. So it's I understand merit in both, but Midnight Odyssey, it's much easier for me to just do it this way.
I mean, you're in good company there. There does seem to be something about the ambient, atmospheric black metal kind of direction that just lends itself to solo projects. Like there's plenty of them out there, and I think it is that complete control. I don't mean that in a negative way, but just having it be a very distinct, specific, personal vision of an artist lends itself where it wouldn't necessarily for, you know, straight up death metal or whatever, where a band setting might be more appropriate.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, it's probably not as riff based as death metal or maybe as a, you know, as a full band, black metal band might be. It's a bit more subtle, and it's something where I think, you know, in terms of dynamics and you know, where passages come in and out, it's very hard to try to explain that in terms that someone who plays a guitar or a bass or something, it's something that is hard for me to put into words, but I can just kind of just do it myself. And yeah
A personal experience for myself. What I noticed with full bands is that there might be some confusion of expression when everyone's contributing ideas, where it's not, you know, one specific voice being expressed. It's actually groups. I know some bands will have like one primary songwriter, but a lot of bands, they just take whatever people create, put it in a blender, and it's like, there you go, that's their band. So there might be a disconnect with expression when it comes to like a full band format, and you don't have that when you do it solo. So
Yeah, and the other thing that you risk is that everyone starts getting influenced by different kinds of music, and they kind of fall out with the music that they're trying to write. And that's when, then you've got to start thinking, obviously you replace musicians, life gets in the way. Sometimes people can't play for family or personal reasons. So for me, it would be far too complicated for Midnight Odyssey to have to do that.
very cool, very cool. So I believe we touched all the main points today. Is there anything else you would like to say before we wrap up today?
Well, Biolume Part 3 is due out 24th of November. That'll be digital and CD. The vinyl is coming early next year. So factory delays are still a thing, unfortunately, for those that are still waiting for the Shards of Silver Fade box set. Apologies for that. Yeah, I hope everyone finds something in the new album that's both, new and different, and they can relate to it. So thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So thanks, Mr. Potter, and Shelley, thanks again for coming back.
Yeah, no, thanks. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I've been following you since you released Firmament back in 2009, so it's a pleasure to actually finally get to speak to you and discuss your music. So yeah, it's been really great. So thank you very much.
No, thank you. Thanks for your support for all these years.